Before we get started, members, can I check that you've got the addendum, that you've seen it, read it? Okay. Pencil? Plenty for signing later. Not quite better wait a moment. Check the old phone is on quiet. You ready to go? Here we go then. Right, good evening everybody. Our visitors tonight, the Development Committee, 13th of February 2020. Our usual emergency evacuation announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the nearest available exit to the chamber. Our assembly point will be at the public car park at the side of the Civic Suite. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please don't return to the building unless permission has been given to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded, and if you've got your mobile with you, please turn it to silent or off. Thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence, have been received from Councillor Wotton, and that takes us on to item 2, substitute members, Councillor Gooding. Our non-members attending, Councillor Sperring, Councillor Rowe, Councillor Steptoe, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Mr Hoy, Councillor Mrs Hoy. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of January 2020. You're happy for me to sign those as a correct and accurate record of that meeting? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Let's start with the top first. Steptoe.
Chairman, item 6, non-pecuniary interest with regard to being the county councillor for the Road South ward, which that item is in, and item 10 as chairman of the investment
10.
board, other pecuniary interest.
9.
9, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Other pecuniary interest, please, on item 9. And non-pecuniary interest as a Raleigh Town Council, although I didn't attend the meeting at Raleigh Town Council.
Okay. Councillor Sperring.
Exactly the same as Councillor Rowe, Chairman.
Okay, and around the top and the bottom. Councillor Wilson, you had your hand up.
Non-pecuniary interest in item 9, member of Rochford District Council and also on the investment board.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Okay, for item 9, but not on the interest.
Councillor Merrick.
Not pecuniary interest on item 9, but as on the board councillor and had some involvement in the discussions actually in the chamber after the presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Weston.
Non-pecuniary, I believe, as county councillor for the Hockley ward, and also my daughter lives at the back of the unit that's being developed.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
Non-pecuniary, I believe. I've had a number of communications with officers regarding item 9, and as a result of that, I've been advised that I could be accused of predetermination. Therefore, I will have to exclude myself from the vote on that one.
Okay. Councillor Rafferty.
Item 9, and the investment board. I've seen this was the last.
So the interest is. Thank you.
Non-pecuniary is a member of the investment board.
Mr. Lucas Gill.
Item 6 being a the ward member for the area, and item 9 non-pecuniary being a member of the investment board.
Likewise, thank you. Councillor Gooding, did you? Yeah.
Interest for being a member of the investment board.
Is that everyone? Right, thank you. Item 6. This is one that was deferred from last time. Just a reminder, there is information on the addendum which you've all told me of Seen, got a copy of and read? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to the wider business park site that's off Cherry Orchard Way, and it relates to part of this site to the southeast corner. The application is for reserved matters relating to landscaping only, following outline planning permission having been granted for the whole site, relating to a 2015 consent. Reserved matters have already been approved in relation to this parcel of the site under a 2018 consent, and that related to layout of the site, including, if we can take you to the layout plan. You just zoom out of that plan, please. All the way out. Yeah, thank you. So including a single large building to the central portion of the site, adjacent to the Spine Road, car parking area to the north of that, and a service yard to the south. So this application relates to landscaping details, including new boundary treatment to the site, a boundary wall to the part of the southern boundary which runs along the red line. An enclosing fence would also feature atop of this boundary wall. The proposal also seeks changes to ground levels across the site, so the scale of the building doesn't increase from that already approved at the previous reserve matters stage. What the site did do originally was slope gently downwards from west to east, and what they've sought to do across the site is provide level ground. So this part of the building is no higher than was originally approved, and they've sought to level the site in relation to the Spine Road to the west. The site also had some changes in relation to ground levels to the eastern portion, and these are best shown on the section plans, if we could take you to those. So this is the same site, you can see, and if you're looking at A, B and C, 3 sections across the site, going from south to north. If I just take B as an example, this shows where the pointer is, the adjacent commercial property to the south, and the land level there, and then it shows the direction northwards going across the service yard here. So the building is just off that plan. So the green line shows the original site level, which had an earth bund, and what's proposed is to very slightly raise the land level, but only very slightly, and put a retaining wall in. And then you can see that the land here is raised slightly. The land level rises very gently, up to a point 4 metres into the site. And this area would be landscaped. So there's this landscaped buffer along here, which include tree planting that would provide a screen in time. And then the site level then falls very gently across the service yard towards the building to the north. The key consideration in this determination is really the effect on the amenity of the adjoining commercial premises to the south in relation to the land levels that have happened there. Members had the opportunity to visit the site and observe the ground level changes that have happened relative to this neighbouring unit. The proposed changes to the land levels are considered acceptable as set out in the officer report, and the recommendation, Chairman, is therefore one of approval subject to the recommended conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Schofield. Just turn the microphone on. Maximum 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you have a minute to go.
Okay. Yeah, good evening to you all. First of all, thank you very much to give me the opportunity to speak in favour of the application tonight, and thank you for the case officer's recommendation for approval. Members of the Planning Committee have, since the January Planning Committee, where the decision was deferred due to the need for clarification on a number of issues, they now have had the opportunity to visit the site to assess for themselves the impact of the proposed level changes to the service yard and the proposed boundary treatments on the adjoining land. At that meeting, the council's officer obviously talked us around the site and went through in considerable detail in terms of the issues that were raised by the application, and took lots of questions from the planning committee members. And I certainly went away from that meeting feeling that everyone understood the application that was before them. I've now got a list of issues that I just really wanted, really just issues of clarification, really arising out of some of the sort of confusion at the last month's planning committee. Firstly, there is a strip of land between the boundary of the IPCO development and the land in Mr. Ryan's ownership. It is an average 2 metres in width and is in the ownership of Southwark Borough Council. It is not fenced, so you can't actually see that when you go to site. The current design of the boundary treatment we are discussing tonight was discussed and agreed with the adjoining owner, Mr. Ryan. We did actually look at a number of different options for the boundary treatment, but after an approach from Mr. Ryan, we actually adopted his proposed design. So therefore, I'm clear that the submitted proposed boundary treatment was specifically requested by Mr. Ryan and agreed with him and reflects his wishes at the time of the submission of the planning application. The proposed finishing levels of the service yard adjacent to the boundary were agreed by Mr. Ryan's technical representative. There was a joint inspection of the site on the 2nd of October and the levels were agreed. The proposed service yard design reduces the potential impact of surface water drainage onto the adjoining land to 0. The proposed regraded service yard now slopes away from the boundary to drain in the middle of the service yard, which then drains into the nearby balancing pond and then onwards away from the plot. Any drainage from the proposed landscape strip is via a French drain, which will be constructed on the base of the retained wall within the application boundary. The proposed boundary treatment, including the landscape strip, retaining wall, are all within the application boundary. The retaining wall can be constructed without the need to access or use any of the land in the ownership of Mr. Ryan, and this has been confirmed by our contractors, Reedy Construction. The 2.4 metre Paladin fence, which will be constructed on the boundary, is not opaque. It is wire mesh in style and will not in any way impact on light levels or amenity on the building on Mr. Ryan's land. The type of fence that will be used on this southern boundary will be exactly the same as was inspected on site by the planning committee members during their visit on Saturday. Similarly, the proposed landscape strip, the revised service yard levels have no impact whatsoever on the amenity or the light levels in the adjoining buildings. In summary, HBD are strongly of the opinion that the proposed service yard levels and boundary treatment will not have any detrimental impact on the adjoining land and buildings, and the planning application should be approved without further delay.
Thank you. Okay, any of our non-members wish to make any comments on this one? No? Obviously, we've had the benefit of making this our second time. So, Councillor Eaves, just before you start, so I'm sorry, but there's no public interaction in this meeting. It is just for members. Sorry, Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. The site visit was asked after there was a good deal of confusion at the last meeting where this came up over the actual levels. When we went over there, I took a laser level over there, and the levels do appear to be as has been presented to us. One thing that does come to mind, one thing that was said to us when we were over there, the fencing that is proposed to be put round, it was suggested that there'd be planting that would be allowed to grow up it. Now, if that's the case, then there could be a case that that might impinge on the light next door. I wonder if we could impose a condition just to suggest that the IPCO or whoever actually owns the site there take responsibility for keeping the growth off of that wire fence.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I did appreciate the visit. I thought that gave a great deal of insight as to what was happening and how we would look at that. There was a little thing that perhaps it's not so important, but the drainage was given that the drainage would be going out to the Crouch. I think it's that I was told on site, but I do think it's going out to the river leading onto the Crouch. But nevertheless, that suits my thanks of that information to where it's going, and it shouldn't have any impact on the downstream from there. Thank you.
Would you just like to pass comment on what the landscaping scheme is described as at this moment?
Let's go back to the, if you can zoom in maybe to the southern boundary. So along this southern boundary, there are a number of different species of plant proposed. It's a landscaped buffer, so it's supposed to have some sort of visual amenity value. And there are a number of trees as well, but they're sporadically planted. There's no specific proposal for any vegetation to grow specifically up the palisade fence. So I don't see any specific objection to putting the recommended condition on if it's a concern that actually a sort of more opaque, boundary to the height might be a problem. But there would be potential for the vegetation to grow up and around the shrubs and the light behind. But it will be managed and maintained by the company looking after the whole site.
Members, we have a recommendation printed on 6.1 going over to 6.2. Can I ask for those members in favour of the approval to indicate? Thank you. That item is approved. Item 7, site of 22 Main Road, Hockley. Again, there is information on the addendum relating to this one.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to this site here in Hockley Town Centre, but adjoining the residential area. They've got residential properties to the west, the north and the east. The application is to convert the existing building to the front of the site to form 10 two-bed flats plus 1 commercial unit. If I can take you to the layout. Just raise it up slightly. So, this application is a resubmission following refusal of a very similar scheme in December last year. This earlier application was refused because the scheme omitted any commercial use within the units. So it's wholly residential, the previous scheme. There was concern relating to the fact that the Hockley Area Action Plan seeks to retain the vitality and viability of the town centre, and that this site, having previously been in a commercial use, should retain some of that element. The revised proposal has sought to address this reason for refusal by including 1 commercial unit proposed for retail use, and that will be in this part of the building here. This would occupy 1 of the flats previously proposed, so 1 additional commercial unit, 1 less residential flat. The proposal essentially only changes in relation to this part of the site. The remainder is exactly the same as the scheme you had before you in December. Obviously, changing this to a retail unit has required some fenestration changes to the front, so this would now be a glazed shop front, whereas there was some windows to a residential property previously proposed. In addition, one of the parking, so there's the same amount of parking and the same layout of parking as previously proposed, but one of the spaces is now a visitor space or could be utilised for the retail unit, but each of the flats has the same amount of parking as was previously considered in December. The only other change resulting from the inclusion of the retail unit affects viability of the site in relation to affordable housing. So what we've done is we've had the viability assessment retested, and that has come out as expected, that the scheme now cannot viably provide any contribution to affordable housing. The application, Chairman, is one of approval, subject to the recommended conditions.
Thank you. We have a speaker on this one, and I've lost. Oh, there it goes. Mr. Browning. 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you've had 4.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jonathan Browning. I'm owner and developer of 22 Main Road, Hockley. In our last meeting in November, I sought to turn the retail unit into the residential to keep the whole building as a residential and not mixed-use development as per the existing approved scheme. The decision was made that the retail unit would have to remain as per the approved scheme, as members would see this as too great a loss to the high street scene. Reflecting on the points raised that evening, I've submitted a scheme that reverts back to that of the original approved, with the retail unit to remain at the front of the building as shown. Having started this application back in May 2018, I am keen to get a resolution and decision on it this evening if possible. I won't go over old ground on where it kind of left me and my father's business financially. I hope that you find the plans put forward to still be sympathetic to the overall design, and hope that I've managed to meet your requirements with the retail unit that you raised last time. That's it, it was just short and sweet. Thank you for your time.
Do any of our visiting members wish to speak on this one? Right. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see the retail unit retained, and thank you for that. Just one small thing that has actually been mentioned by residents there is the balconies that are in particular around the back do overlook gardens that are at the back. There, I went there this afternoon to go and see, and I do appreciate that that is the case. Now, I'm not looking to change things, but I wonder if we could ask the developer to, instead of putting clear glass in those balconies, to put obscure glass in there. The reasoning being that when people are sitting down inside the flats, they look straight out into the garden. Now, I know that when they go onto the balcony, they will still be looking over the gardens, but what it does mean is that there is a degree of privacy that is then afforded to the people with the gardens who are overlooked by the balcony. If that condition could be agreed, I think that that would be advantageous to the residents who are adjacent.
I think technically we need to make sure we're not raising new issues, because we very clearly, the top paragraph on 7.4 said what our reasons for refusal were. However, if we just take a little bit of advice here.
I think we could look to deal with that under the condition 3, which states all details of all external facing and roofing materials, including but not limited to, although those words aren't in there, but that's what the gist of that is, including windows and doors for use in construction shall be approved prior to their use on the site. So we can have that conversation, bearing in mind that. So I think that would effectively cover that.
Yep. Okay. Other members indicated we have a recommendation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Weston. Yes, dear, there.
Just a quick question, that's all. The unit itself, is that the whole length of the building as was, the unit at the front of the...
As per the plan.
Sorry.
Or is there a flat included in the beginning of that, with that unit?
Sorry, so if, briefly, I have got the elevation plan as well, that might be clearer. If you take you to the elevation plan. So this is the front elevation. Okay. So as you look at that from the street, this is the proposed retail unit with that glazed sort of frontage, and then these windows and doors serve the 2 residential flats at ground floor. There's 2 ground floor flats, 1 commercial retail unit adjacent to them.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, recommendation printed on 7.1, going through 16 points through to 7.3. Members happy? Are those members in favour, please indicate. Thank you. That item is carried. Item 8. Particularly note again information on the addendum regarding this one, land to the north of London Road, Rayleigh. I think just for members, we've got a clear officer recommendation for deferment, So I think we probably won't have discussion about this one unless someone's got a particular issue, but we do need to hear the officer's presentation first.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application relates to the strategic site between Rawrath Lane to the north and London Road to the south, to the west of Rayleigh. The site overall benefits from outline planning permission granted under a 2015 consent. If I can take you to the next plan and zoom out of that plan a little, please. So this plan is now orientated. Can you zoom out just slightly? I don't know if it does zoom out anymore. If it doesn't, it's not a problem. So this plan is orientated the other way from the location plan that you've just seen. So you've got Rawrath Lane here to this side, and you've got London Road to this side. And the application is an application for reserve matters for part of the Spine Road in the central portion of the site. So the Spine Road already has reserve matters approval to the northern section and the south, and this application relates to two sections, one just south of the brook that bisects the site, and one smaller section just to the north of that. Reserve matters, the application relates to landscaping, appearance, layout, scale and access, so all those reserve matters are for consideration. A bridge across the site will be proposed at some stage, but that's not part of the current proposal. A swale is proposed to the northern part of the carriageway in both sections, and there's footways and cycleways are included footways to both sides, and a cycleway is included on one side. Some changes in the land levels are proposed, and they vary between 20 centimetres and 2.5 metres, getting closer to the bridge because the land is going to have to sort of rise up. At some points there are also lowerings of the land levels, but just to a small degree. Members will note on the addendum that a consultation response has now been received from Essex County Council Highways, which does not recommend the application favourably. There's some technical issues with the kind of road layout. This road would be expected to be adopted by Essex County Council. And given that, the recommendation from officers is therefore one of deferral.
So this item's going to come back to us again when the technical detail is sorted. So to save wasting your time, members, if you're in favour of the deferral, please indicate. Right, thank you. That item is deferred for now. Item 9, land adjacent to 14 Hambro Close. Again, information on the addendum. When you're ready, again.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, this application relates to a land adjacent to 14 Hambro Close. The photo before you shows the application site and shows that it's a vacant open plot of land located on the northern side of Hambro Close, in a prominent position at the end of a vista when entering Hambro Close. The site is open in nature and comprises a sycamore tree. This tree is not covered by a tree preservation order. Okay, planning permission has been sought to erect a two-storey building comprising two-bedroom flats. Layout of 5 car parking spaces. Sorry, I can't get the plan up. Sorry. Yeah, layout of 5 car parking spaces, including 1 visitor space and private amenity space. The amenity space proposed for the ground floor flat would be provided through the provision of a rear garden, together with a terraced area to the front, measuring a total of approximately 54 square metres. The proposed first floor flat would have amenity space in the form of a balcony. This is to be provided to the front, overlooking the green area to the northern end of the site, which are open green fields, and would measure approximately 9 square metres. The private amenity space complies with the Council's SPD2 housing design. A secured cycle store is being proposed in this corner of the site, which would front onto Hambro Close and would comprise space for 2 bicycles. A bin store would also be incorporated into a recessed area set within the side elevation of the building. I'd like to refresh you on the previous site plan that was submitted, which was for the application that was refused previously back in August. Like I say, it was brought before members of the Planning Committee in August 2019 and was refused on the basis that the proposed development lacked a visitor car parking space. This application has been submitted in order to overcome the previous reasons for refusal, which relate to a lack of a visitor car parking space. As you can see with the layout, this is fronting Hambro Close, and there is 4 car parking spaces laid out. So there was 2 per flat. So this was the application that was previously refused. This was the cycle space that was previously proposed. If I take you on to back to the block plan, as you can see, the car parking laid out to the front, to the rear of the building, but fronting onto Hambro Close is not that dissimilar from current layout of the surround street scene. Access is gained off Hambro Close, whereby there would be an area hard standing laid out to accommodate 5 car parking spaces. The car parking includes 1 visitor bay. The car parking is laid out in tandem arrangement. All car parking spaces measured to the preferred bay standards, which is 5.5 by 2.9 metres. The sizing proposed is adequate for tandem parking. The access is considered acceptable and would not have an impact upon highway safety. The car parking proposed comply fully with the parking standards. The cycle store, which has been incorporated into the rear garden, that could accommodate 2 cycle spaces. Like I said before, this is in a different location to what was previously proposed, but is adequate for the scale of development as it complies with the car parking standards, which require 1 cycle space per dwelling. Taking you onto the elevations, as you can see, the only other proposed changes is through the provision of a terraced area at the ground floor and a balcony at first floor, which both front onto the open green fields to the north. There is a cantilever projection introduced in the elevation that fronts onto Hambro Close. These changes would not result in any additional detrimental impact upon the occupiers' neighbours' properties by way of causing excessive overshadowing as a result of being overbearing or causing overlooking and loss of privacy. The proposed development is one for approval subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers on this. Mr. McLatchie. Five minutes. I'll let you know when you've got a minute left.
I'm Adam McClatchy, Director of Front Architecture. We're the agents for the application and speaking today on behalf of Rochford District Council. You'll be aware, as the case officer has mentioned, this application was before you last year and was refused for 1 point only. That reason for refusal was for the lack of visitor parking. As confirmed by the officer, we now have a visitor space. All parking spaces are 5.5 by 2.9, fully meet policy and are fully compliant. There's been a number of objections on this application raised by local residents. I'll go through some of those. There's been mention of covenant on the land. That's not a planning consideration and shouldn't be.
Could you ask the chap to speak up, please?
Oh.
A little bit closer to the mic.
Apologies. Yeah, there's been a number of objections on the application. Firstly, there was comment on a covenant on the land. It's not a material planning matter and shouldn't be something that should raise reason for refusal. I don't know what you heard of what I mentioned before, but I was just saying that the application has come forward today in a very similar form as the previous application, but overcoming the only one reason for refusal. That one reason for refusal being the lack of visitor parking, which we now achieve and are fully compliant in that. In theory, principally, all the other elements of the application stay as they were, which there was no refusal raised on that basis. So our approach to that was to adapt the current parking layout to show what we have now, where we have 5 parking spaces, 2 spaces per unit, plus a visitor parking space, all 5.5 by 2.9, and are fully policy compliant. Other objections that are raised are in reference to the drainage of the site. The applicant welcomes a condition for the drainage, which is commonly found on any application, that a suitable drainage strategy will be submitted as a condition prior to commencement of the application. Now, that drainage strategy may well include something such as a attenuation tank, which will take in the surface runoff and distribute that at a slower rate. And in theory may actually help the residents there if they feel they've got a problem with the surface drainage. So it will be designed by a suitable civil engineer and submitted as a pre-commencement condition, so that's agreed in writing prior to any works being carried out. There was other objections raised to the relocation of the lamppost. The lamppost is proposed to be relocated. We're aware that there's residents have raised concern about lighting to the footpaths either side. On applications we've had in the past, we have had lighting schemes conditioned, so we could provide low-level bollard lighting along there. Again, that would light the footpaths adjacent the site, and actually again improve the situation for the residents there. The bollard lighting would be low level enough that the spread of light would be a positive contribution to the footpath, but wouldn't have a negative effect on the amenities of the adjacent properties. Yeah, I think another objection was the loss of the sycamore tree, which the case officer has mentioned. It's not TPO'd. It's not been raised as an objection by any statutory authority. And a suitable replacement tree has been suggested, which again the applicant welcomes as a condition to any approval. In terms of policy, we are compliant in parking. We are fully compliant. We are compliant with regard to your amenity space, national minimum standards, storage areas. All of those things have not changed since the previous application, which you didn't raise a reason for refusal on, and the one point that you did raise refusal on has been addressed and is now fully policy compliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's wait.
Could you make sure Sonia, my picture's up there, please? Thanks. The one for me with the circles. Thanks. Not wasting time talking about that.
5 minutes, and I'll
Thank
let you
you.
know when you've had 4 of them.
Can you put my picture up, please?
Is that the one?
I want the one with the drawing, please. P4, the other one, next one down. Thank you. Can everyone see that? Right. Thank you. Right, I'm back here again to talk on behalf of the community. This is a community play area that you're thinking of getting rid of again. That's got a covenant on, but not a material consideration. But it is a place for my children with special needs. They play there all the time. You can see this says no ball games on it. Another picture will come up and show you. Design is shoddy. It's a complete redesign of this whole thing. Nothing to do with just one parking space. Number 14 faces the side of it. It's not facing the fields. So number 14, they're always going to be facing someone else's front door or the side of a building. It's not acceptable to put that there. So that's wrong already. The cantilever in the balcony would have adverse effect on them and causing overlooking and loss of privacy, plus the noise level would increase. They'll have daily increased noise, stress, light pollution and overshadowing of their home. The relevant planning history before in 2004 did say that there was a loss of informal space, harmful and insufficient provision for amenity spaces just because the new people get it. Nothing's changed. Just because it wasn't mentioned in 2019 doesn't mean it's gone away. You're taking our space. This is an infill, which elected councillors here last time and said they would refuse it if it was a private application rather than council's own application itself. The council should act beyond reproach and not expect preferential treatment to that of its residents. You chuck it out, whatever. Amenity space. You've now changed the amenity space. You've now got a balcony. By the way, that balcony is going to face a street lamp. Ground floor may have changed. The design has changed as well. Bin storage, you're not going to use ordinary bins. She didn't mention it. You've got bulk bins. Great big bulk bins. Where are they going to go? Because they're not going in the cycle shed. You got it? You're going to put bulk bins somewhere on there. That's going to be a health hazard. You're destroying my tree. I asked to get a TPO on. It was refused. I asked 3 times to put a TPO on it since August. He refused it, saying it doesn't really matter because even if there was one on it, planning policy overrules a TPO. So what's the point? It wouldn't have mattered anyway. It doesn't comply. Parking and highway safety. This is on a junction. If you could show the picture, please, of the actual junction itself. Tandem parking is unlikely to be utilised in its potential, especially if both cars are in regular use. Acceptance by the council means they will require additional provision of unallocated parking spaces, i.e. they're not going to park in their parking spaces. You know that. It's the last resort on your standards. So you know full well people will not park there. It says it itself in your policy. You're not adhering to it. They never park properly. Probably use it for something else, probably the bins. This was the whole reason it was refused last time. And the bays. It says very clearly that this design is inclusive. It could be adapted, the ground floor. Well, guess what? If it's going to be adapted, where's my disabled bay? Where is it? It's not big enough for a disabled bay. You've not done that in your parking, so it's exclusive and it's discrimination. Development must be refused for that. The lighting, yeah, bollards, great, we'll knock into them at night. It's the most important light of the T-junction. And we won't be able to see the other one on the other side. I've written to you all know this. The one on the other side will not be moved. That'll be facing a balcony. I'm sure they'll ask to get that moved too. Flooding and surface water, great ideas, but frankly, it's destroying a tree, a natural soakaway. There will be flooding. I read it and it says, possible soakaway, possibly this, possibly that. You can agree to it, but the point being, they're suggestions. You're letting the developer decide after you've got the approval. Not good enough. Natural England Habitat Report says, significant impact on the zone of influence. Hey, guess what? Let's just give you 120 quid. That'll do. You're already going to pay it to yourselves. That is pathetic. This is climate change. It's a play area. It's a green space. You're ruining the carbon footprint of a place you wanted to do better for. I'm disgusted that you're doing this or even considering it. I get the point. Social housing, I get the point. But this has got a covenant on it. This is a green space. It was left empty for a reason. You're trying to do worse. The detriment of the character, the appearance of the locality. It's unsafe and it impacts health and well-being. It creates a crime and disorder and the fear of crime. Dark lighting. Pitch dark. I hope you watched my video. Pitch dark out there. We need those lights. Moving them is going to cause one or the other alleyway. And where it's done, Sue, they're moving the alleyway on the other side, not near your front door. So you will be pitch dark going to your front door every day if they move it. But let's have some bollards in the way. So Sabrina, with your disability, you can't walk down there. You'll knock over it. Are you getting it? This is the lowest level of families here. We are single mothers. We are social housing. This is a social housing estate. It was originally built as a social housing estate. We have got every diverse and disability, mental disability, physical disability. We have, how many have we got? At least 2 disabled blue badges people. And you're going to do all of this to us for a bit of land that is paltry land grab, pure profit. It is not in the local plan, but you're going to do it anyway. I say shame, and it's shoddy. And I think if you've got any sense, you'll refuse it. Thank you very much.
Right. Councillor Eaves, with your interest, do you wish to speak? Because I'll give you the opportunity to speak and then you're going to leave. Okay, Councillor Merrick, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have had numerous correspondence with the Managing Director and the legal AD. I completely disagree with them, but I think in the interest of the threat that's been made, I would rather not actually open myself to a possibility of being reprimanded.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, to our visiting members, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, here we are again. I totally understand the amount of work that's gone into this application. And and I totally understand that there's certain situations that cannot be held or cannot be discussed as a or refusal for a planning application. However, all along the way, I've asked officers to make sure that we are not leaving ourselves hanging out to dry here. I've asked that all legal issues be addressed before this comes to planning again, and that hasn't happened. And I'm astounded, Chairman, quite frankly, absolutely astounded. This is our application. We could have withdrawn it. I get that the application's sound in the planner's eyes, but I'm sorry, there's too many issues outstanding legally for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have several concerns with this application, and I do appreciate the opportunity given me to speak. I would like to put on record, actually, that we've sat here a number of times complaining that the planners don't understand parking policy with regards to sides of the bays, and that's been rectified this evening. So thank you very much. I know we've directed some criticism towards you, and it's obviously worked. The owner and applicant for this development is Rochford District Council. This appears to me, personally, to be a financially based decision by some officers of the council to sell off land with planning permission to gain the financial reward in doing so. I spoke about this application in August last year and remain opposed to it for the following reasons. Paragraph 127 of Section 12 of the National Planning Policy Framework requires planning decisions to comply with certain guidelines, some of which are that it must function well and add to the overall quality of the area. It must be sympathetic to the local character and history. It must establish a strong sense of place. It must optimise the potential of the site to sustain appropriate amount of mix of development, including green and other public space. It must create spaces which are safe and inclusive and promote health and well-being with amenity for existing as well as future users. This development seeks to remove the only piece of remaining open land for the existing users, so therefore it fails on that part. The National Planning Policy Framework also advises that planning decisions for development should ensure that the developments do not undermine the quality of life for residents, and moreover, this is the important bit, it requires, not it advises, it requires that permission should be refused for developments of poor design and those which fail to take opportunities available to improve the character and quality of the area and the way it functions. I would therefore, Chairman and members, ask yourselves the following question. Does this development enhance the quality of the existing area or not? If the answer is no, then the NPPF requires you to refuse it. Policy H1 of our own core strategy requires that intensification of smaller sites will be resisted. It does, however, allow some infill development on smaller sites, but only if it relates well to the existing street pattern density and character. Chairman, I'd like to draw you and members' attention to the committee decision taken on the 6th of February 2004 for this application, where it was refused on the basis that to build at this location would be harmful to the local area due to the loss of open space for playing. You will no doubt hear at some point that you must only consider, in fact you've already heard, that you must only consider factors surrounding the visitor parking, as that was the reason for refusal in August last year. However, in doing so, what you've been told about, and that what they're alluding to, is the potential for an appeal, and the financial implications to the council if that appeal were upheld and costs were awarded. Let's not forget here, the applicant's us. Are we likely to appeal against ourselves? Well, obviously not. Therefore, that is not an issue in my respectful submission. I'd also urge members to consider the motives behind this application. We are all elected members of this council. We are sent here by the residents of our respective wards. They trust us to do the right thing by them. If Rochford Council wanted to do the right thing by the residents of Hamborough Close, then this application would have been withdrawn. And it will be withdrawn now and leave the open space as it is. It is a place which enhances the area of the Close. It enhances the life and the well-being of the Close and its residents. And yet, the officers wish to take that away from them. This is not a third-party developer approaching us applying for planning permission to build. This is our own officers trying to sell the land with planning consent, thereby raising its market value to generate funds. That, it appears, to be more important than the well-being and the health of the residents of Hamborough Close. Chairman, I am sympathetic to the financial needs of this council, and I applaud the officers who are trying to their best to make this budget work. However, not or ever to the detriment of the residents. One final thing, Chairman, I would like to point out is I noticed in the opening today we have at least 5, if not 6 members of your Development Committee who are also on the Investment Board. Now, I'll stand corrected, and maybe Chris could advise me better on this, but I would therefore suggest that, as I think it's the Investment Board that have decided to bring this piece of land forward, then they are predetermined in this respect, as they've already made a decision to bring this piece of land forward and therefore cannot be capable of making an uninformed and unpredetermined decision this evening, Chairman. I therefore urge you all to refuse this application on the basis that it's contrary to the policies I have stated. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to start by saying that this application is being put forward by the council. When we as a council put forward applications, we should be adhering to all of our policies and making sure what we apply for is the best of the best. We should be showing an example to developers, and I do not feel that this application does that. Moving on from there, I have also asked this council to withdraw the application. I did email a number of officers and councillors who are involved in the investment board, including the managing director. I only had one councillor respond. Thank you very much, Councillor Mrs Rowe, because she's the only one who responded to me on that. The others failed to do so on the very important point of withdrawing this and taking it back to the investment board. I'll now move on to the actual application. Regardless of what the officer said, this is a new application. The building design has changed and the parking spaces have changed. The amenity space has changed. So it's a new application. The sizes have changed. So this doesn't prevent this committee from looking at all of those and refusing on additional grounds to the parking, which was the original problem. Also, this has changed in other ways. When this was brought before the committee last time, there was the council was certain that they owned the land and had all rights over the land. That has changed. It's clearly shown on some residents' deeds that they have the right to use that land and to walk over that land and use it as it will. Now, that's not a planning consideration, we're told, but I'll come on to that now. The policy DM3 of the Local Development Framework Development Management Plan, big title, Item 6, avoiding the loss of important open space which provides a community benefit and or visual focus in the street scene. This has already been stated by the resident. This is an important play area used by residents. This meets policy DM3 6. Sorry, it's Roman numerals, so I'm translating in my head. And for that, you must have considered and positively addressed that issue, and that is not done in this report nor the previous report, as it was not known at the time. Moving on, and this is the next one's quite important, I feel. I know the chairman doesn't like me interacting with officers while I'm doing my little speech, but if they would happen to have the picture DM3 or version 4 or version 3 available, 201, which shows the parking space, I would be grateful, because in the report it refers to, this is the one, it refers to, and I'll get there in a moment because I want to make sure I get this right. It refers to drawing number 200, revision P3. This is version 201, revision P4. So the report is written to a different drawing. I don't know what that drawing is, but and if you look in paragraph 5.37 on page 9.9, you will see it actually. This is where it says drawing number 200, revision P3. We have been shown drawing 201 or 200 is version revision P4. I have a copy. It is there. It's the only one on the site. There is not a P3 on our website at all. We only have P4. And this, the report states, would provide a garden area in excess of 50 metres for the ground floor flat. So it's clearly referring to a different plan to the one shown and the one shown tonight, where the garden area is 45.5 58.7 square metres. The garden area or amenity space is brought up to the 54 metres by the addition at the top end of the picture of a terrace area 9 metres squared. Our amenity space policy says usable amenity space. I would suggest the 9 metre square amenity space, which is basically just over a metre wide, is more of a pathway than a usable amenity space. So I believe we are failing on grounds of amenity space. And I am unsure what the committee would want to do about the fact the report states one plan and they're showing a different plan to the one the report refers to. I don't see how you could reach a decision on that basis at the very least, but certainly it's open to refusal on that basis. Parking. I do like parking, and these spaces appear to meet the parking standard. However, on the plans you've got to the left you've got the amenity space and the first bay for flat 1, which is next to the amenity space. Amenity space, the boundaries have yet to be decided. I would suggest amenity space will have a hard boundary. They normally do. It'll be a fence or a wall. I'd imagine a fence. When a parking space is next to a fence, it requires a further metre of space on top of the parking standards. So the one parking space there for visitor space next to the amenity space fails our parking standard because it requires a further metre space. That's clearly stated in the Essex parking standards. On another point, which hopefully is one I've not just done because that would be embarrassing, but I do that all the time. We have the report on paragraph 3.3 mentions that the fact that the layout of the dwellings along this part of Hanborough Close front onto an open field. They do not. The building to the right of this development faces onto the development, not the open field. This is why it's going to lose light at the front door. That's why if the light disappears at the front of the plot, they will be in darkness. It is relevant. On that basis, I'm now running out of my voice, I think, seems to be going. But I would recommend, sorry, there's one other point which was in the conditions, which is on page, so there's suggested conditions on page 9.3, sort of 3/4 of the way down, after it says means of enclosure and other boundary treatments, which would be the fencing. Below that, you've got car parking layouts. I'm suggesting if you do pass it, you really should remove car parking layouts, because surely that's what this plan is doing, and that's what we're deciding. I'd be loath that this council might agree one, or this committee agrees one parking layout, and it's then changed at a later stage. It looks like it's just been cut and pasted to me, that condition, which it shouldn't really be there. That's it, Chairman. I think the committee should refuse this application on the grounds that I've said, or at the very least defer it. Thank you.
Any of our other visiting members wish to speak? Just for the sake of clarity, item 5 covered the declarations of interest. All members, where appropriate, had taken advice, and a reminder, it is for members to determine their interest. And advice has been given and passed. So I don't believe we have any concerns on that front. Members, we've had a number of people speak to us already on this item. Please just remind you that as members of the planning committee, we must determine on planning issues and be focused on just what those are, and be mindful that on page 9.5 we have the reason for refusal that was that went through last time. I think Councillor Stanley, you indicated, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Several things have materialised since the last application, on the basis that the property is now a completely different design to what was brought up last time. Could we put that picture back up again, please?
Can we?
Thank you. the amenity space, it looks to me as though it's been drastically cut. It's gone again.
It's blank. Yeah, it's not coming up. Go back to the. Go back to that one.
No, the little folder.
Oh, right, so
Open it again.
Sorry, Chair. We seem to have a bit of a problem bringing the elevation drawings back up again.
Yeah, that one.
Just bear with us.
that one. That one?
Yeah. Is that the one you want?
Yes.
Drawing 201. Have you got that?
Yeah, do you want to carry on
Got that?
speaking?
Do you want
We'll
201?
try and pull it up.
That's the one. Yeah. Right. As I said, the amenity space seems to have drastically reduced. Plus the fact that I don't think the amenity space of this 9 metres square for the rear of the property is sufficient for to accommodate a play area for any children that might be there. Might actually occupy the upper level, of which we know that could possibly happen. And I don't consider that amenity space is adequate in no stretch of the imagination. The parking bays, as we have already been told by our own policy, is that on the way the parking bays are, parallel parking bays, they should be 6 metres, not 5.5 metres. We have that in our policy, and they're not. So they don't comply. On the basis that we've got, if we get someone reversing from their car into those bays, the people who park in front of them or in parallel to them, those people can't move their car out until the other people move their car. Now that's not to say that they're not going to do it, but we're going to have a lot of shuffling of cars in that area, which is very small indeed in the highway, as there'll be other cars parked there as well. And I fear that this is just a relaxation of our parking, which shouldn't happen at all. We have a policy that parking bays should be adjacent to each other and not in parallel. Other councils don't really like the parallel parking, and we have said we don't like the parallel parking, and yet you've put it on there. I don't see an area for waste bins. There's nothing on there that shows me where the waste bins are going to be. Unless you're going to put them in the planting area, I don't know. But there you are. I wouldn't like to see waste bins in the parking area, in the planting area in any case. There's so many, and getting on to what has already been said, is that does this council really acknowledge the residents that are in this Rayleigh town? And we are supposed to be keeping their interest at heart.
No, I'll point
No,
out,
wait a minute. We are supposed to be
Councillor
keeping their
Stanley,
interest at heart.
we're supposed to
I
be
don't-
judging, Councillor Stanley, please, we're supposed to be judging this application
Okay, I'm
on
going
planning
back to- I'm
matters.
going back to the
I'm just
application
being really
on
clear
this.
about that
I'm
for
going back to
everyone.
the application on this. It's just a reference to it. That green space is absolutely vital to this community. Absolutely vital. And this is not, I think that this is not the right way to go about it. Obviously, where the red line is, I dare say there may be a fence all the way round this property. I don't see an entrance to it. There is no entrance if you're going to put the red line all the way round, and there is I don't see the entrance. How do you get into the property? How do you get in through the cars where the visitor car park is, or the parking spaces, where do you get in? Because, as has already been noted, that there are pathways to the left and the right of the property, and they're already existing. So how do you get into the property? I don't know. I just can't see that. I think that really we should look at this again and again if it is a viable thing that we are doing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I just ask for your comment on the drawing issue, amenity space and sparking space, please?
If this helps, the amenity space to the ground floor flat is this area, this sort of L-shaped area here, and the terrace to the front. So in total, the ground floor flat would have 50 square metres. And then the first floor flat is provided with a balcony that is 9 square metres, which is greater than the minimum 5 square metres that the Supplementary Planning Document 2 advises should be provided to flats. So that relates to the amenity space that's provided. In respect of the parking, do you want to go back to the layout, Katie? So all of the spaces are going to meet the preferred bay size. I take Councillor Hoy's comment in relation to the parking standard, which states that where it's adjacent to a fence, you know, in terms of providing increased manoeuvrability about that space, it does say that an additional metre will be provided, but 2.9 metres as a width to the preferred bay size is quite wide, and would, we say, in this sense, still be a usable space. There's no disabled bay provided. The requirement in the parking standard is that would specifically relate to a visitor space on the site, not in relation to the spaces specifically allocated for the flats. Was there anything else?
The bin.
Oh, the bins, sorry. If we can take you back to the elevation plan. Zoom in over here, Katie?
Yeah, over here. Yeah.
So there is sort of they're sort of inset into the part of the ground floor of the building. So it's this area here that would be provide the bin store to the site.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Chairman, just to really amplify Councillor Hoy's point about, I'm a bit uneasy that we've got a configuration management issue here, that the report doesn't appear to reference the same drawings, and my concern is that we give approval for something that doesn't match up. So that's just an observation.
Shall we just do
Yeah. Shall I just hopefully provide a bit of clarity? So on the report, page 9.1, so the first page of the report at condition 2, it sets out the plan numbers, which are correct. So they're the correct plan numbers. At page 9.9, where it specifically relates to the amenity space at paragraph 5.37, that plan reference is a typo. It should read 201 P4. That is one of the plans referred to in the condition.
And this 200 P3, which is in front of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should both, because they both show.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the correct plans are referenced in the report, but it should additionally say 201 P4 in paragraph 5.37. That's the layout plan that shows the wider amenity space at the site, and this other plan shows the amenity space to the first floor flat.
You'd like to carry on, please?
Yeah, the next one is a question, really. The application 03-01117/FUL, that's referenced in the report, and that was where the planning application was turned down because it was effectively taking away a piece of open space. Now, notwithstanding that that wasn't the reason for refusal at the last meeting, does the previous meeting doesn't supersede the reason where it was turned down before? Am I correct in saying that?
What I would say is that members need to determine this application in relation to material planning considerations. We are mindful that the previous decision related solely to parking, but policy DM3 and all the bullet points relating to that, including the avoidance of loss of important open space, which is a community benefit, is a material consideration to this application.
And just for clarity, the reason why I'm asking this is what I'm trying to get at is we haven't superseded the report, not the last report, but the report when it was turned down in 2004. So that material consideration still stands. Is that correct?
Sorry, hopefully I can be clear, but in the determination of this application, policy DM3 in its entirety is a relevant consideration, and that includes point 6, which is relating to the avoidance of the loss of open space. That is a consideration to this application.
Okay. One more.
Thank you. Yeah, and it follows on from Councillor Stanley. As you look at the plan, it's actually probably going to be the southeast side of the boundary. So that's where the car parking is. So if you look at the bottom right, what is going to mark the boundary between the site and the footpath?
Nothing. I don't think it's going to be this. So this boundary here would be entirely open. So you might have a different surface material, but this is, and you might be able to get away with a low-level fence here, but then potentially you're creating the same here, which you've got a fence adjacent to a parking bay. But you're accessing these parking spaces across here. So what would delineate the boundary is the change in surface material.
And the reason why I ask is actually for the conflict between pedestrians on the footpath
here
and vehicles coming onto the site.
So, I mean, potentially you could have some sort of low level or some sort of boundary treatment along there. What you wouldn't want it to do is to be such, or you might want to set it back slightly because you wouldn't want it to impact on pedestrian visibility displays and the like in this corner here. You could. I don't think the boundary treatment is identified specifically in the application proposal. So essentially, that would usually be dealt with by condition. But certainly this area here, for obvious reasons, isn't, the only delineation is the surface material across here. You could have some sort of boundary treatment along there.
Okay. Councillor Stanley again.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so now you've indicated where the bins are, which would mean that they would have to travel right from the one end of the plot to the other end of the plot to get the bins out onto a machine, which I find
we need to just focus not on the practicalities of living there, but the planning issues.
I think really that is sort of so far away, for people they've got to walk round to put their rubbish in the bins, to come out. There's real no sense of good planning there as to where they deposit, because they've got to walk all the way round to deposit their rubbish in. And I think that is really sort of something, well, I don't think that's in the right place. However, I do feel that with our policy, we should have 6 metres, 12 metres in all for parking. As you very well know, you don't park bumper to bumper. And I don't think the 5.5 is long enough. In our policy, when we do parallel parking, there's 6 metres each and not 5.5. And again, extra width, when we turn around and say we're mitigating the width, I do believe that our policy, has been said, should be a metre wider on that side if it's going to be on a boundary as a fence. So parking bay 1 should be made wider for that particular reason. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, I think we've tested all the arguments. There might be some elements of our current policies that we like or don't like, but our policies are the policies by which we must make a judgment. Do you want to... Some new points, please, then.
Thank you, Chair. I don't actually think we need any new points. I would actually like to move that we reject this motion on the grounds that it violates our planning policy DM3/6, on the grounds, in fact, that's it, on that ground alone.
And would you like to just expand on that one a little bit for the members who aren't completely conversant with DM?
Yeah, I think this is still a material matter, and that's been confirmed by officers. This is around the avoiding loss of land that is used by the current community. And whilst the previous application was rejected on the parking grounds, this application is slightly different. It doesn't only change the layout of the parking, it affects the amenity space. And I don't believe this rejection supersedes the rejection in 2004 anyway. Therefore, I move that we reject this on the grounds that it removes land that is valuable to the current residents and violates our policy DM3/6 of our core strategy.
Okay. Thank you. Right, thank you for that clarity.
Thank you.
Members, does anyone else wish to speak on the motion for refusal? We have a motion for refusal, which has been appropriately seconded. Officers have noted the detail. Those members in favour of the refusal, please indicate. Those against? That item is refused. That brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to shove all of that in the box.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm going to say to Matt Hall, right, don't bother putting another application in.
No, that is quite categoric. I'm quite, that is